In this video we're going to look at area and perimeter. Now area is the amount of surface inside a two-dimensional shape. It's the amount of space a shape contains. So here we've drawn a number of shapes and we can see that the grey contained within the shapes is the area. It's the amount of space they contain. And the red lines around the outside is the perimeter of the shape. Okay. Now, whenever we're looking at units of area, which would be everything contained within it, they're always in terms of squared millimeters, or squared centimeters, or squared meters, and so on. Now, the distance around the outside, the perimeter, because they're a length, they would all be in terms of millimeters, meters, or centimeters. So they'd be the same units, but they wouldn't have a squared or a power. And if we're trying to work out the perimeter or the area, it is important that all measurements are in the terms of the same unit. So we don't ever do a calculation or work anything out with different units. We must make sure that they're all in the same one. So there I have a square and a rectangle. We probably learnt this, or we definitely would have learnt this back in primary school, where we count the number of squares that the object would have. So you'd maybe do it over squared paper, and then you'd count all the squares, and that would give you a good approximation for area. And then we would have extended that up to show that the area of a rectangle is the length times by the breadth. So that's the two sides which are at right angles to each other or perpendicular to each other. So area is length times breadth. Sometimes we talk about for the area of a rectangle to be base times width, or there could be many other different forms of it, but essentially we're just multiplying the two perpendicular measurements, the length by the width, or the length by the breadth, or whatever. Now a square is a special rectangle, so a square is a rectangle where all the sides are equal. So we could use the rectangle formula for area, so it would be length times length. But anything multiplied by itself is itself squared. So whenever we do length times length, it's length squared. And in terms of notation, it's just going to be A equals L squared, where L is the length of any of the sides. So example 1, find the area of the following. Now it might be helpful for us to draw a shape. So draw a square and a rectangle for each of these before we do any working out. So I'll draw my square for part A, and we know it's 5 centimeters all around, and the area of a square is length squared, which is 5 squared, which is 25, and then the units of area are squared centimeters. Part B, we'll draw a rectangle, and we'll put on the measurements of 7 and 4. So the area is length times breadth, which is 7 by 4, which is 28, and that's going to be squared centimeters again. And then part C, we've got this rectangle, which is 2.1 centimeters by 7.4 centimeters. So the area is again the length times the breadth, which is 2.1 times 7.4. So to do that, we need to do a multiplication, and it's easier to multiply by the smaller number. So I'm going to write it as 7.4 multiplied by 2.1. Now, whenever we're doing that, we ignore the decimal places. So we know that in the question, there's a total of 2 decimal places, which means in our answer there needs to be 2 as well. So we now just do long multiplication. So we'll multiply by the 1, and we'll do 1 times 4 is 4. 1 times 7 is 7, and we put down our 0 and multiply by 2. 2 4s are 8, and 2 7s are 14. And we'll add these together. So 4 and 0 is 4, 7 and 8 is 15, 5 and carry a 1, 4 and 1 is 5, and then 1's 1. We said that in the question there were 2 decimal places in the question, so then in the answer there's also going to be 2. Which means we put our decimal place in between the two 5s. So the area then is 15.54, and again it's squared centimetres. As we've already said then, perimeter is the distance around the outside of a 2D shape. And because it's a length, then it'll be measured in millimetres, centimetres, and so on. If we're finding the perimeter of a shape, we mark it with an X at the starting point and then work around the shape carefully until we get back to that point. And we need to write out the calculation we're doing as part of our working out. So if we get these two examples and we're trying to work out the perimeter of them, what we need to do is put an X to where we're starting. Now the first shape is a rectangle and we've got the length and the width, so it's always a good idea to fill in the other sides as well. So we know that the bottom length is going to be 8 centimetres because the opposite sides are equal, and similarly the left hand side is going to be 4. So to work out the perimeter then, we're going to be doing 8 plus 4 plus 8 plus 4, and adding those together we get 24 centimetres. For the second one then, again we'll put an X at where we're going to start. And I always like to go around in a clockwise direction. So we're going to, P is going to be 5.5 plus 11.6 plus 9.3. And to work that out, we could do a sum. So 11.6, 9.3, and 5.5. 5 and 3 is 8, and 6 is 14. So we'll do 4 and carry a 1. We'll put our decimal point in a line. And then 5 plus 9 is 14. Plus 1 is 15, and 1 that we carried is 16, so 6 and carry a 1, and then 1 and 1 is 2, so the answer is going to be 26.4 centimetres.